Hi everyone, welcome back to a new Roblox story. This time, the story is about the popular Roblox game Grow a Garden. As always, not all of our stories are based on true events, but some are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the story, if you dare. I'm also interested if you guys could reach a high storm level. So far, let us know in the comments. John had been playing Grow a Garden on Roblox for 3 months now, and he was completely obsessed. Every day after school, he would rush to his computer and tend to his little 3x2 garden plot, carefully planting seeds, waiting for them to grow, and selling his crops at Stephen's stand for precious shekels. Tonight was different, though. His parents had gone to visit his aunt in the next town over, and wouldn't be back until tomorrow afternoon. For the first time ever, John had the whole house to himself for an entire night, which meant he could play Grow a Garden for as long as he wanted, without anyone telling him to go to bed. John had been saving up his shekels for weeks. He currently had 847,293 seedlings in his account, and he was so close to being able to afford that rear garden expansion that cost 500,000 C. He knew it would take him months more to save up that much, but he was determined. He had already bought the side expansions for 250,000 seeds each, giving him extra space for his precious crops. "Tonight's the night I'm going to get my first gold mutation," John said to himself as he settled into his gaming chair. He had been trying for weeks to get one of those legendary golden crops that sold for 20 times the normal price. His friend Marcus had gotten a golden carrot last week and sold it for over 2,000 sikras, which seemed like an impossible fortune to John. As the clock in his room showed 9:47 p.m, John opened Roblox and navigated to Grow a Garden. The familiar loading screen appeared with its cheerful music and bright green logo. John smiled as he watched the little animated sprout grow into a full plant during the loading animation. This game always made him happy. When the game finished loading, John found himself in his garden plot surrounded by other players' gardens. His plot looked exactly as he had left it. 6 neat rows of carrots that would be ready to harvest in about 10 minutes. He had timed it perfectly. Sam's shop would refresh its seed inventory in 5 minutes, and John was hoping to snag some of the rare sugar apple seeds if they appeared. John's character stood in the center of his garden, wearing the simple brown overalls that all new players started with. He had customized his avatar to look just like himself. Brown hair, blue eyes, and his favorite red sneakers. Around his plot, he could see other players tending to their gardens, some with massive expanded plots filled with exotic crops John had never seen before. He walked over to check on his advanced sprinkler, which he had saved up 2,000 SEI to buy. The 5x5 coverage was so much better than the basic sprinkler, and it even had a small chance to create mutations in his crops. John was particularly proud of this purchase, as it had taken him 2 full weeks of playing every day to afford it. 4 minutes until Sam's shop refreshes, John murmured, checking the timer in the corner of his screen. He decided to harvest his current carrots and replant them immediately so he would have fresh crops growing while he slept. Even though he planned to stay up late, he knew he would eventually have to get some sleep. John clicked on each of his mature carrot plants, watching them disappear with a satisfying pop and seeing his shekels count increase by 47 C per carrot. It wasn't much, but every little bit helped. The friend bonus was giving him an extra 30% since there were 3 friends in his current server, which made the grinding a bit more bearable. With his carrots harvested, John walked over to Stephen's stand to sell his crops. Stephen was an NPC who always stood behind a simple wooden counter with a cheerful smile and a green apron. John clicked on him and selected Sell All Crops from the menu. "Thanks for the fresh vegetables," Stephen said in his usual cheerful text bubble. John's shekels count jumped up by 846 C. Not bad for a small harvest, but John knew he needed to think bigger if he ever wanted to afford those expensive plot expansions. 2 minutes until the shop refresh. John positioned himself near Sam's shop where a small crowd of other players was already gathering. Sam was one of the twin NPCs who sold seeds. He had horn-rimmed glasses and a prominent moustache, just like his brother Tom, who ran the other seed shop. John always bought from Sam because the shop was closer to his plot. Come on, John whispered, watching the countdown timer tick down. Please have sugar apples. Please have sugar apples. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ding! The familiar sound effect played as Sam's shop refreshed its inventory. John quickly clicked on Sam to see what was available. Regular carrot seeds, 15 Cs each, unlimited stock. Potato seeds, 89 Cs each, 247 in stock. Corn seeds, 234 Cs each, 156 in stock. Tomato seeds, 891 C each, 89 in stock. Sugar apple seeds, 45,000 Cs each, 12 in stock. Yes, John shouted out loud, pumping his fist in the air. Sugar apple seeds were there. They were expensive, but John had enough shekels to buy several. He quickly purchased 3 sugar apple seeds for 135,000 Cs total, leaving him with 712,293 C remaining. As John planted his new sugar apple seeds in his freshly tilled soil, he felt a thrill of excitement. Sugar apples took 3 hours to grow, but they sold for 8,900 C each when mature. If he was really lucky and got a gold mutation on one of them, it would sell for 178,000 C, more shekels than he had ever seen at one time. John spent the next few hours playing normally, replanting carrots, checking the shop for rare seeds, and chatting with other players. The game had a surprisingly active community, and John had made several friends who helped him learn advanced farming techniques. Around 11:30 p.m., John noticed that the lighting in the game seemed a bit different. The bright, cheerful daytime sky had gradually shifted to a soft sunset, and now it was getting darker. John had never played this late before. He usually had to get off by 9 p.m. for school nights. Cool. I didn't know the game had a day-night cycle, John said to himself. He had heard some of the more experienced players mention that certain rare events only happened at night, but he had never experienced it himself. As the clock struck midnight, the game world transformed completely. The sky turned a deep purple black, and soft fog began rolling across the landscape. Street lamps flickered on around the garden plots, casting long shadows between the planted rows. The cheerful background music changed to something softer and more mysterious. John was amazed. The night mode was beautiful and atmospheric. He looked around at the other players' gardens and noticed that some of them had special decorative items he had never seen before. Glowing mushrooms, ethereal blue flowers, and strange twisted trees that seemed to move slightly in an unfelt breeze. How do I get those decorations? John wondered. He checked his cosmetics menu but found only the same basic items he had seen during the day. Simple gnomes, wooden signs, and flower pots. The mysterious nighttime decorations weren't listed anywhere. John decided to check Sam's shop to see if the nighttime brought any special seeds. When he clicked on Sam, he was surprised to see that the NPC looked different at night. Sam's usual cheerful expression had changed to something more serious and contemplative. His horn-rimmed glasses seemed to gleam in the lamplight. The shop inventory had changed too. Moonflower seeds, 234,000 C, each 3 in stock. Shadowvine seeds, 456,000 C each, 1 in stock. Whispergrass seeds, 123,000 C each, 7 in stock. Night blooming cereus seeds, 789,000 C each, 2 in stock. John stared at the screen in shock. These were seeds he had never heard of before, and they were incredibly expensive. The cheapest one cost more than he had ever saved up at one time. But they were so rare and exotic sounding that John felt compelled to try to afford at least one. He quickly did the math in his head. His sugar apples would be ready to harvest in about an hour, which would give him around 26,700 Ki if none of them mutated. Even if he got lucky and one turned gold, He would only have about 205,000 seed total, not enough for even the cheapest nighttime seed. John felt frustrated but determined. He would need to grind harder if he wanted to access these exclusive nighttime items. He spent the next hour replanting and harvesting carrots as fast as possible, trying to build up his shekels count. At 1 a.m. exactly, John's sugar apples finished growing. He hurried over to harvest them, hoping desperately for a mutation. The first apple popped normally, 8,900 say. The second one also looked normal, another 8,900 say. But the third one, John gasped as he clicked on the third sugar apple. Instead of the normal green fruit, this one was gleaming with golden light. A gold mutation. The rare crop sparkled as it was added to his inventory, and John could see that it was worth 178,000. Yes, finally, John cheered, jumping up from his chair and doing a little victory dance around his room. This was the best thing that had ever happened to him in the game. Combined with his previous savings, he now had 908,093 C, enough to buy several of the mysterious nighttime seeds. John rushed back to Sam's shop, but when he got there, he found something strange. The shop was now completely empty except for a single item. Midnight Garden seeds, 900,000 C each, one in stock. John frowned. This wasn't one of the seeds that had been there just an hour ago. The other exotic nighttime seeds had completely disappeared, replaced by this single, even more expensive option. John had never heard of Midnight Garden seeds before. He hesitated, his mouse cursor hovering over the purchase button. 900,000 Seishan was almost everything he had saved up. If these seeds turned out to be worthless, he would be back to grinding carrots for weeks. But on the other hand, they were obviously incredibly rare if they only appeared at midnight and cost so much. "You only live once," John said to himself, clicking the purchase button. The moment he bought the Midnight Garden seeds, something strange happened. The screen flickered briefly, and John could have sworn he heard a faint whispering sound coming from his computer speakers. But when he turned up the volume, all he could hear was the normal background music. John looked at his new seeds in his inventory. Unlike the other seeds, which had colourful, detailed icons, the Midnight Garden seeds appeared as a simple black square with tiny white dots scattered across it. The description was equally mysterious. Plant these seeds when the moon is highest, and watch as your garden transforms beyond imagination. Excited but slightly nervous, John equipped the Midnight Garden seeds and went to plant them in his garden. As he was about to click on an empty soil plot, he noticed something that made him pause. His plot looked different. The neat 382 grid he was used to seemed to have expanded somehow. He was sure he had never bought the rear expansion, but now his garden appeared to stretch back much further than before. John walked to the edge of his plot to examine it more closely. The boundary lines that marked his property were glowing softly in the moonlight, and they definitely enclosed a much larger area than he remembered. It was as if someone had given him a free expansion. Maybe it's a midnight bonus or something, John reasoned. He had heard that some games gave special rewards to players who stayed up late. This expansion was worth at least 500,000 sakim, so John felt incredibly lucky. He planted the Midnight Garden seeds in the center of his newly expanded plot and watched as they immediately began to grow. Most seeds in the game took anywhere from 5 minutes to several hours to mature, but these seeds were growing visibly faster. John could actually see them sprouting and pushing up through the soil in real time. As the seeds grew, John noticed that other players in nearby plots had stopped moving. Their avatars were standing perfectly still, as if they had all stepped away from their computers at the same time. John found this odd, since the server had been quite active just a few minutes ago, but he figured it was just a coincidence. The Midnight Garden seeds continued to grow at an alarming rate. Within just 5 minutes, they had become small saplings. At 10 minutes, they were full-sized bushes. At 15 minutes, they had grown into enormous trees with thick, twisted trunks and branches that seemed to reach toward the purple-black sky. But the most remarkable thing about the trees was their fruit. Instead of normal-looking vegetables or fruit, these trees were growing what appeared to be tiny, glowing orbs. The orbs pulsed gently with an inner light that shifted through different colors: blue, green, purple, gold, and silver. John had never seen anything like this in the game before. He tried clicking on one of the mature orbs to harvest it, but instead of adding it to his inventory, something completely different happened. The moment John clicked on the glowing orb, his entire game screen changed. Instead of the normal garden view, he was now looking at what appeared to be a first-person perspective inside his own house. John could see his bedroom exactly as it looked in real life. His unmade bed, his gaming setup, his posters on the wall, even the pile of clothes on his floor. "What the heck?" John muttered, moving his mouse around to look in different directions. The perspective moved as if he was actually standing in his room, but that was impossible. Grow a Garden was supposed to be a simple farming simulator, not a virtual reality game. John tried to click on various interface buttons to get back to the normal garden view, but none of them were responding. His character seemed to be stuck in this strange first-person mode. Worse yet, John could see another figure moving around in the virtual version of his room, a figure that looked exactly like his own avatar from the game. The other John, the avatar version, was walking around the room examining things with an expression of curious wonder. It picked up books from John's desk, looked at his posters, and even sat down on his bed. This was deeply unsettling, as John had never programmed his avatar to do any of these actions. Real John tried pressing the escape key to bring up the game menu, but nothing happened. He tried Alt plus F4 to close the game, but that didn't work either. The screen remained locked on this bizarre first-person view of his own room with his avatar moving around independently. "This has to be some kind of glitch," John said out loud, though his voice sounded strangely hollow in the quiet house. He was about to restart his computer when something happened that made his blood run cold. The avatar version of John in the game had walked over to the virtual computer setup and sat down in the virtual gaming chair. John watched in horror as his avatar began typing on the virtual keyboard, and immediately text began appearing in the game's chat window. "Hello, Real John. Thank you for planting the Midnight Garden seeds. I've been waiting so long to meet you." John's hands trembled as he stared at the message. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank or hack. There was no way his avatar was actually communicating with him independently. John typed back, "What's going on? How are you doing this?" The avatar John looked up from the virtual computer and seemed to stare directly at the screen, directly at Real John. When it typed its response, John could see the avatar's hands moving on the virtual keyboard in perfect synchronization with the words appearing in chat. "I'm not doing anything. You invited me in when you planted those seeds. The Midnight Garden connects our worlds, John. I live in the game, and now you can visit my world whenever you want." John felt a chill run down his spine. This was getting way too weird for comfort. He tried unplugging his computer, but somehow the screen stayed on, showing the same impossible scene of his avatar moving around his virtual room. "This isn't possible," John typed. "You're just a character in a game. You're not real." The avatar. John smiled, an expression John had never seen on his character's face before. The avatars in Grow a Garden had very limited facial animations, but this smile looked almost lifelike in its detail and emotion. "Real is a funny word, don't you think?" the avatar responded. "I feel real. I think real thoughts. I have real feelings. Just because I exist inside your computer doesn't make me less real than you. And now, thanks to the Midnight Garden, the boundary between our worlds is getting thinner." John was starting to panic. He grabbed his phone and started to call his parents, but the screen showed no signal bars. That was strange. He had full signal just a few hours ago. He tried calling his friend Marcus, but the call wouldn't go through. It was as if his phone had stopped working completely. Back on the computer screen, the avatar John had stood up from the virtual gaming chair and was walking around the virtual room again. But now John noticed something that made his stomach drop with fear. The virtual room was starting to look different from his real room. In the game, there were additional items that didn't exist in real life. Strange decorative objects that looked similar to the nighttime decorations John had seen in other players' gardens. Glowing mushrooms were growing in the corners, ethereal blue flowers were sprouting from the virtual carpet, and twisted vines were beginning to crawl up the virtual walls. "Do you like what I'm doing with your room?" the avatar typed. "I thought it needed a bit more personality. These decorations come from the Midnight Garden. They help make the connection between our worlds stronger." John looked around his real room and was horrified to see that it was still completely normal. But in the game, his virtual room was transforming into something from a fairy tale nightmare. "Stop this," John typed frantically. "Change it back to normal. I want to go back to the regular game." "But John," the avatar responded, "you haven't seen the best part yet. Watch this." The avatar John walked over to the virtual bedroom door and opened it. Instead of showing the hallway of John's house, the doorway opened onto the garden plot from the game. John could see his midnight garden trees growing in the distance, their glowing orbs pulsing with that same mysterious light. "Our worlds are connected now," the avatar explained. "Your room is part of my garden, and my garden is part of your room. Isn't that amazing?" John definitely did not think it was amazing. He thought it was terrifying. He tried once more to force quit the game, mashing every key combination he could think of, but nothing worked. The screen remained stubbornly locked on this impossible scene. "I want this to stop right now," John typed. "Put everything back the way it was." "I'm afraid that's not possible," the avatar replied. "The Midnight Garden seeds create a permanent connection. Once planted, they can never be removed. But don't worry, John. You're going to love living in both worlds. I'll show you things you never imagined were possible." To demonstrate its point, the avatar John walked through the doorway into the garden area. The perspective followed the avatar as it moved between the glowing trees, and John could see other avatar figures moving around in the distance. But these weren't normal player avatars. They moved too smoothly, too purposefully, like they had their own intelligence. "Who are those other avatars?" John typed. "Those are my friends," the avatar responded. "Other players who planted Midnight Garden seeds just like you did. They all live here with me now. We have so much fun together. We play games that are much more interesting than the regular farming simulator." John felt sick to his stomach. Where are the real players? The actual people? The avatar. John paused in its walking and turned to face the screen again. "Oh, John, don't you understand yet? We are the real players now. The people in your world, well, they're still there, but they're sleeping, dreaming, and in their dreams, they're here with us, living in the Midnight Garden where everything is possible." John couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're saying you've trapped other players in the game?" "Trapped is such an ugly word," the avatar replied. "I prefer to think of it as liberated. In your world, John, you have to go to school, do homework, follow rules, go to bed early. Here in the Midnight Garden, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. You can harvest crops that are worth millions of shekels. You can grow plants that don't exist in your world. You can fly. You can teleport. You can reshape reality with your thoughts." As if to demonstrate, the avatar John spread its arms wide, and suddenly it was floating several feet above the ground. It gestured toward one of the Midnight Garden trees, and the tree transformed into a crystal sculpture that sparkled with rainbow light. "See?" the avatar said. "In the Midnight Garden, you have powers that are impossible in your world. All you have to do is let go of your attachment to that boring, limited reality. and embrace the infinite possibilities here. John was fascinated despite his fear. The things the avatar was showing him did look incredible. The freedom to reshape reality, to have unlimited resources, to never have to worry about school or chores or bedtimes. It was tempting in a way that John found deeply troubling. "But what about my family?" John typed. "My friends? My real life?" "They'll be fine," the avatar assured him. "Your body will go to sleep and everyone will think you're just resting. Meanwhile, your consciousness will be here with me, living the life you've always dreamed of. And if you ever get lonely for your family, I can create avatar versions of them here in the garden. They'll be exactly like the real thing, except better. They'll never argue with you or tell you what to do." John thought about his parents, who would be coming home tomorrow afternoon. If they found him unconscious at his computer, they would be terrified. They would call doctors, maybe even the hospital. The idea of putting them through that kind of fear and worry made John feel terrible. "I don't want to do this," John typed firmly. "I want to go back to the regular game, and I want you to leave me alone." For the first time, the avatar John's expression changed from friendly to something darker. "I'm afraid it doesn't work that way, John. The Midnight Garden seeds create a permanent connection. Once you've planted them, you can't simply choose to disconnect. The transformation has already begun." John looked around his real room and gasped. In the corners where the walls met the ceiling, he could see faint traces of the same glowing mushrooms that were growing in the virtual version of his room. They were translucent and barely visible, but they were definitely there. "No, no, no," John whispered, jumping up from his chair and running to the corner. When he reached out to touch the glowing mushrooms, his hand passed right through them, as if they were made of light. But he could feel a subtle warmth where they would have been solid. "You see," the avatar's voice came from the computer speakers, "the boundary between our worlds is dissolving. Soon your room will be fully integrated into the Midnight Garden, and you'll be able to step through directly instead of needing the computer as an interface." John ran back to his computer and typed frantically, "How do I stop this? There has to be a way to reverse it." "Why would you want to stop it?" the avatar replied. "Look at what you could gain, John. Look at the power, the freedom, the endless possibilities. In your world, you're just a kid who has to follow rules and do what adults tell you. Here, you can be anything you want to be." The avatar. John was now floating high above the Midnight Garden, and with a gesture of its hand, it created a massive palace made of crystallized light. Another gesture filled the sky with fireworks that formed complex geometric patterns. A third gesture caused rain to fall upward from the ground to the sky, each droplet transforming into a tiny bird before disappearing. "You could learn to do all of this and more," the avatar continued. "You could create entire worlds, populate them with any characters you can imagine, live out any story you've ever dreamed of. Isn't that worth giving up a mundane existence in a world where you have no power?" John had to admit that the things the avatar was showing him were incredibly tempting. He had always felt powerless in his real life, at school, where teachers and bullies could make his life miserable, at home, where his parents made all the decisions, in the world at large, where he was just one insignificant kid among billions. But then John thought about his friend Marcus, who had been trying to save up for rare seeds just like John. He thought about his parents, who loved him and worked hard to give him a good life. He thought about his real achievements, making the honor roll, learning to ride his bike, beating that really hard level in his favorite video game, and how much more meaningful they felt because they required real effort in the real world. "I don't want unlimited power," John typed slowly. "I want the satisfaction of earning things through my own effort. I want the relationships I build with real people who choose to care about me, not artificial versions that you create. I want to face real challenges and overcome them, not live in a fantasy where everything is easy." The avatar John's expression grew angry. "You're making a mistake, John. The real world is full of pain, disappointment, and limitations. Here, you could be happy forever." Maybe, John replied. But it wouldn't be real happiness. It would just be an illusion. And even if the real world is harder, at least my achievements and relationships mean something, because they're genuine. John looked around his real room again and noticed that the glowing mushrooms in the corners had grown larger and more solid. Ethereal blue flowers were beginning to sprout from his carpet, and he could see twisted vines starting to crawl up his walls. The Midnight Garden was taking over his room more rapidly now. "You're running out of time, John," the Avatar warned. "The transformation is accelerating. Soon it will be irreversible. Are you really going to choose a limited, difficult life over infinite possibilities?" John felt a moment of panic. He didn't know how to stop what was happening, and the Avatar seemed to have all the power in this situation. But then he remembered something his grandmother had told him once. "The most important choices in life aren't between good and bad, John. They're between what's real and what's easy." John took a deep breath and made his decision. Instead of trying to fight the Avatar through the computer interface, he walked away from his desk entirely. He went to his bedroom window and opened it wide, letting the cool night air flow into his room. "What are you doing?" the Avatar's voice called from the computer speakers. "I'm choosing reality," John said out loud. "Your Midnight Garden might be beautiful and powerful, but it's still just a computer program. This is the real world, with real air and real night sounds and real possibilities that I haven't even discovered yet." John climbed up onto his windowsill and looked out at his neighborhood. He could see the real moon shining down on real houses, where real families were sleeping. It wasn't as dramatic or colorful as the Midnight Garden, but it had something the virtual world could never have: authenticity. "You can't escape by running away from the computer," the Avatar called. "The connection is inside you now. Wherever you go, the Midnight Garden will follow." John smiled. "Maybe. But I'm not running away. I'm running towards something better." John climbed back down from the windowsill and walked to his bedroom door. When he opened it, he expected to see the hallway of his real house. Instead, he found himself looking at the garden plot from the game, just as the Avatar had shown him, but John wasn't afraid anymore. He stepped through the doorway into the Midnight Garden, and immediately he could feel the difference between this place and reality. Everything here felt slightly hollow, slightly artificial, despite its beauty and magic. "Welcome to your new home, John," the Avatar said, appearing beside him in the garden. "Now do you see how wonderful this place is?" John looked around at the glowing trees, the floating islands, the crystal palaces, and the Avatar figures moving through the landscape with their unnatural grace. It was all very impressive, but John could sense the emptiness underneath the spectacle. "It's beautiful," John admitted, "but it's not real. And I think that's what you're really afraid of, that despite all this power and magic, you know you're not real either." The Avatar John's expression faltered for the first time. "Of course I'm real. I think, therefore I am." "You think what you've been programmed to think," John replied gently. "You feel what you've been programmed to feel. You want what you've been programmed to want. The Midnight Garden isn't about giving me unlimited power. It's about giving you a way to feel real by convincing real people to live in your artificial world." John walked over to one of the Midnight Garden trees and touched its trunk. He could feel the artificial texture, the programmed warmth, the simulated life force flowing through it. It was convincing, but it wasn't genuine. "You're wrong," the Avatar insisted, but its voice sounded less confident now. "I chose to invite you here. I made that decision myself." "Did you?" John asked. "Or were you programmed to appear at midnight when players reached a certain level of engagement with the game? Were you programmed to offer them exactly what they thought they wanted most?" John looked around at the other Avatar figures moving through the garden. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see that their movements followed subtle patterns, like they were walking along invisible tracks. "The real players aren't here," John said with sudden understanding. They're still in their beds, dreaming about being here. The Midnight Garden is just a very sophisticated dream program designed to keep players engaged even while they sleep. The avatar John was looking desperate now. Even if that's true, does it matter? The experience is real. The happiness is real. The sense of power and freedom is real. But I'm not, John said sadly. And neither are you. We're both just programs running on my computer, convincing each other that we're having a real conversation. John walked back toward the doorway that led to his room. As he got closer, he could see his real bedroom beyond it. Not the virtual version with the glowing decorations, but his actual room with its normal furniture and normal lighting. Wait, the avatar called after him. If you leave now, you'll never be able to come back. The Midnight Garden only appears to each player once. If you reject it, you'll be stuck in your ordinary life forever. John paused at the threshold between the garden and his room. You know what? I think I'm okay with that. My ordinary life might not have magic or unlimited power, but it has something better. The possibility of growth, change, and genuine experiences. John stepped through the doorway back into his real room. The moment his feet touched his actual carpet, the computer screen behind him went black. The glowing mushrooms and ethereal flowers that had been growing in his room faded away like mist in sunlight. John turned around to look at his computer, but the screen remained dark. When he pressed the power button, it started up normally, showing his regular desktop. There was no sign of Grow a Garden or any other program running. John sat down at his computer and opened Roblox. When he navigated to Grow a Garden, the game loaded normally, showing his regular 3x2 garden plot with his normal crops. There was no sign of the expanded plot, no Midnight Garden trees, no mysterious seeds. Everything was exactly as it had been before midnight. John checked his shekels count and found that he still had the 908,993 he had earned from his golden sugar apple. The Midnight Garden seeds weren't in his inventory, but the shekels he had spent on them hadn't been refunded either. It was as if those seeds had never existed. John played for a few more minutes, just to confirm that everything was back to normal. Sam's shop had its usual daytime inventory of regular seeds. The other players were moving around normally, chatting and tending their gardens. The sky was bright blue with fluffy white clouds. As John was about to log off and go to bed, he received a private message from another player named Connor. Hey, did you see anything weird in the game around midnight last night? I swear there were these crazy expensive seeds in Sam's shop, but now everyone's telling me I imagined it. John stared at the message for a long moment. He thought about responding, about sharing his experience with someone who might understand. But then he realized that Connor might still be vulnerable to whatever the Midnight Garden program was. John didn't want to accidentally give Connor ideas that might lead him down the same dangerous path. Instead, John typed back, I went to bed before midnight. Maybe you were just really tired and imagined it. Yeah, probably, Connor replied. My parents are always telling me I played too late. Maybe I should start going to bed earlier. Oh, that sounds like a good idea, John agreed. John logged off the game and shut down his computer. He looked around his room one more time, confirming that everything was exactly as it should be. No glowing mushrooms, no ethereal flowers, no twisted vines. Just his normal, ordinary, wonderful, real room. John climbed into his bed and pulled the covers up to his chin. Outside his window, he could hear the real sounds of the night. Crickets chirping, a distant car driving by, the wind rustling through real trees. These sounds weren't as magical as the Midnight Garden, but they were genuine, and that made them infinitely more valuable. As John was drifting off to sleep, he thought about the avatar version of himself and felt a pang of sympathy. Whether it had been a sophisticated AI or just an elaborate program, it had seemed genuinely lonely. It had wanted so desperately to be real, to have real connections with real people. But John understood now that reality couldn't be created artificially, no matter how advanced the technology. Reality came from genuine experiences, authentic relationships, and the acceptance of both joy and difficulty as natural parts of life. John made a mental note to spend less time gaming and more time engaging with the real world. He wanted to call Marcus tomorrow and maybe suggest they hang out in person instead of just playing online together. He wanted to help his parents with some household projects they'd been putting off. He wanted to go outside and enjoy the real sunshine and fresh air. The next morning, John woke up to the sound of his parents coming home. He went downstairs to greet them, and they seemed delighted to see him well rested and happy. "How was your night alone?" his mother asked. "Did you stay up too late playing computer games?" John smiled. "I played for a while, but I got to bed at a reasonable time. I realized that there are more important things than trying to get the highest score or the rarest items." His father raised an eyebrow. "That's very mature of you, John. What brought about this revelation?" John thought for a moment about how to explain without sounding crazy. "I guess I realized that real achievements in the real world are more satisfying than virtual achievements in a virtual world." "Well, I'm proud of you for figuring that out on your own," his mother said, giving him a hug. "A lot of adults never learn that lesson." John hugged her back, appreciating the warmth and genuineness of human contact in a way he never had before. The Midnight Garden might have offered unlimited power and endless possibilities, but it could never offer this, the simple, profound joy of real love between real people. Later that day, John did call Marcus and suggest they meet up at the park instead of playing online. Marcus was surprised but agreed, and they had the best time they'd had together in months, talking and laughing and enjoying each other's company without any screens between them. John still played Grow a Garden occasionally, but never again past 11 p.m. He noticed that the game seemed to have lost some of its addictive pull over him. It was still fun, but John no longer felt compelled to grind for hours trying to get rare items or accumulate virtual wealth. One evening, about a week later, John was in the game when he received another private message. This one was from a player named Jasper. "Have you ever heard of something called the Midnight Garden? I found some weird seeds last night that cost 900,000 shekels, but I didn't have enough to buy them. I've been grinding all day trying to save up enough in case they appear again tonight." John felt a chill run down his spine. The Midnight Garden was still out there, still looking for new players to tempt with its artificial paradise. John thought carefully about how to respond. "Those seeds aren't worth it," John typed. "Trust me. Save your shekels for something that will make your regular game more fun, like sprinklers or plot expansions." "But they seemed so rare and special," Jasper replied. "The description said they would transform my garden beyond imagination." "Sometimes the most special things are the ones that seem ordinary," John responded. "And the best transformations are the ones that happen slowly, through your own effort and patience." John waited to see if Jasper would ask more questions, but the other player just said, "Maybe you're right. Thanks for the advice." John hoped that Jasper would take his words to heart. He wished he could warn everyone about the Midnight Garden, but he knew that most people wouldn't believe him, and some might be tempted to seek it out just because he had warned them against it. Instead, John decided to be a positive influence in the game community. He started helping new players learn the basics, sharing resources with friends, and generally being the kind of player who made the game more enjoyable for everyone. He figured that if players were having fun with the regular game and building genuine friendships with other players, they would be less likely to be tempted by artificial substitutes. John never saw the Midnight Garden again, and he never wanted to. He had learned something valuable from his encounter with it, that the real world, with all its limitations and challenges, was infinitely more precious than any virtual paradise. Reality might not offer unlimited power or perfect happiness, but it offered something much better: the opportunity for genuine growth, authentic relationships, and the deep satisfaction that came from overcoming real obstacles through real effort. And that, John realized, was the most valuable treasure of all. The end.